Hello, everyone. Welcome to our conversation today on evaluation competencies in the process of global convergence. It's my pleasure first to introduce Soma da Silva from Sleva. I see that she's muted. I don't know, Juliana, if you need to help unmute Soma.
Fine. Right, I'm unmuted, right. Thank you, Tessie, and it's a great pleasure to be the moderator for this session. Let me extend a warm welcome to all participants of this webinar, Evaluation Competencies in the Process of Global Convergence. This webinar is organized by Sri Lanka Evaluation Association in collaboration with the EnCompass Center for Evaluation at Sri Jayewardenepura University, Sri Jayewardenepura University, and the Asia Pacific Evaluation Association. So I have great pleasure now in introducing the resource person, Tessie Catsambas, although she needs no introduction.
Soma, thank you.
It's a bit presumptuous of me to introduce you, Tessie, but anyway, let me. Tessie is founder and CEO, CFO of EnCompass LLC, a 20-year-old organization of more than 125 staff that provides services internationally in evaluation, learning, and leadership development. Tessie was past president of the American Evaluation Association in 2019 and recipient of the Well Partners Award 2015 for her international advocacy for evaluation. She has managed numerous evaluations and led training in a range of topics. An advocate for new and emerging evaluators, she frequently speaks on how evaluation helps organizations live values strategically and effectively. Tessie has co-authored a book entitled Reframing Evaluation Through Appreciative Inquiry, advocating for the systematic study of success in evaluation. She holds a master's degree in public policy from Harvard University. So it's my pleasure, Tessie, now to invite you to conduct the session. Over to you, Tessie. Thank you.
Thank you, Soma, and it's a pleasure to be working with Sleva. I am a deep fan and admirer of the work that you're doing, and seeing how Sri Lanka as a country with Sleva's leadership has given us so much to learn and to admire. So it's just a pleasure to be working with you after meeting you and seeing your leadership in 2012 in the birth of Eval Partners. So a warm welcome to everyone. I'm very excited to talk about this topic and to have a conversation with you because it's very near and dear to my heart, and I think it's one of the really important topics and developments for us in our profession. So let's just take a quick look to see who is in the room. If we can take a moment to respond to a chat poll, rather a poll that helps us see a little bit who's in the room. Juliana. So just take a moment to respond to see what roles you have, and if it's other, just put it in the chat. If we've missed a category, if I've missed a category in my quick way of putting this together. Oh, you know, I can already see that I'm missing international partners. So I don't know. Maybe you all will be other. Okay, so we have a range of people here. And I noticed that not everyone has responded. Okay, yes, development cooperation has not been, in general, development cooperation is not on this list. Okay, just getting a little, just getting a little bit, a little sense of it. All right, so if we can go to the next slide, since Juliana is helping me today. So today, I wanted to just briefly touch on the history of this conversation on competencies, just to bring everyone up to date. Many of you are part of this history, so I'm not telling you anything new, but that'll be very short. Then I want us to review a little bit the benefits of moving in this direction of consensus. And we're not starting from scratch. I will share with you what some of the conversations that have been already taking place, and seek your feedback and your level of agreement and your additions to that conversation. So I'm seeing today's session as adding and continuing the conversation rather than kind of statically presenting something. Then we're going to just take a look at the competencies, just take a little bit of a view of what is this thing we are talking about. And then I want to talk about how we have, how we are thinking to organize and to continue the discussion, and then just open up the space for us to talk about what's next. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So in 2010 was, maybe it's even before, but one of the earliest kind of solidified competency models was developed in that CES. And then several others were developed. I'll show them in just a second. And in 2018, the AEA completed really a 4-year process, if you can imagine that, and developed and posted its competencies. UNEG had just posted its competencies in 2016. So it seemed that a lot of people have been working in parallel to develop competency models and have felt the need to have a clear sense of what competencies are. So in 2019, I would say that the need had matured. It's not that necessarily, I think it was just a convergence of everyone saying, you know, let's just take a look to see the levels of agreement we have, and what it is that we need to be doing. So let's see the next slide. So we have evaluation. Why have a consensus? What was it that brought us together? These are some of the things that we talked about. Having a defined profession, having a seat at the table, and increasing evaluation use, defining a path for professional improvement that's hard to do without those competencies, point to a level of required quality. It's hard to have the quality conversation without clarity about competencies, and enable a better focus of evaluation educational programs, so there's some consistency around the world. So this is a poll to invite you to tell us your level of agreement with these motivations, and in the chat, I invite you to add any additions or comments related to this issue of why are we bothering to move forward here in an international consensus of evaluation competency. You see the question, Deborah has posted it also in the chat, and it's in front of you. So please go ahead and tell us what of these motivations resonate with you, which ones, and also in chat, share with us some of your reactions, ideas, things you want to add. And we'll talk in a moment about that pathway and issues around that pathway. But I just wanted to pause for a minute and think about the motivation for this. Where this list comes from is several conversations we had in Minneapolis at the conference of the American Evaluation Association, where first around 50 of us got together in a session and worked in small groups to discuss this issue. And then we had a dinner of about 22 people who discussed this issue further, this question, this motivation for consensus. So, so I'm seeing here, you can only choose one. So perhaps we should choose. Oh, I see. You can choose only one. Oh, I see. So Juliana, people can only choose one of the polls. Is it possible to allow people to choose more than one? And absolutely, Frederick, it's hard to have a defined profession without having a clear sense of competencies. And if evaluator and evaluation means something different with each client, with each country, with each VOPE, then it starts to diffuse our kind of collective power to promote evaluation. So I think that, yeah, sorry about the technology is not perfect. It's just kind of trying to create a little bit of a dialogue. So I understand that we can't do multi-voting. So I appreciate it. Sorry about that, but it kind of gives us a sense that there is people resonate in general with these particular goals. And certainly, Jim, working with clients, it's very hard for them to hire people when, I mean, they have to come up with their own ideas, but who informs those ideas and how do they connect with the academic profession and with the people preparing evaluators, and what happens when those the academic community is in different countries and they have different competencies. So absolutely, this was really really important. Okay, so if we can get to the next slide. So when we looked at the competencies, we saw that there was quite a bit of agreement. These are just a few of the competency models. But basically, when we looked deeper, if I can have the next slide, we saw some buckets. The technical and professional bucket, something around context and situational practice. Management seemed to be a common one. And interpersonal skills were up there as their own bucket. And reflective practice, something around development, learning, evolving as evaluators. So, and I understand, Marlene, that there are issues around how you ask people to demonstrate that they have capacity in any of these competencies. But let's just, today, I'm just focusing on the fact that we don't even have an international competency agreement as to what evaluation needs. So maybe even an even more basic need. So when we got together, there was just so much, a sense of so much consensus that if I can have the next slide, in the competency discussion, Gail Barrington from CES proposed this kind of way of thinking about it, that we could quickly throw in that gray bucket the accepted core competencies, that would be easy to do. And then let's limit the discussion, focus the discussion on number one, some context specific ones, and then also some core ones that are under discussion where we are not agreeing yet, and where we need to have deeper conversations. And in terms of having 1 hour, I'm seeing a raised hand, but I would ask you to keep putting your comments in the chat so we can really stick to our hour and get to all the issues that we want to talk about. So I think that once we have this agreement, then there are other issues like you are raising. I see Aser raising the issue, supporting Marlene's issue, that how you show these competencies can exclude young and emerging evaluators. And I think that we've had a lot of conversations about that. There's a lot of work to do in that area. So thank you for that comment. And so back to this issue of having consensus. I wanted to just check with you on how close you think we are, if we can get to the next slide. How close do you think we are to consensus? From wherever you sit, from whatever you know in terms of competency models, how close are we? So Juliana, how are we going to do this?
So if you want to click on view options, you should see the option of annotation tools.
Where is view options?
View options. If you click on the bar on the bottom.
At the bottom, mine is at the top.
Okay, then you have the 3 dots, and to enable the annotation tools, you just click on that, and then you should have a little bar where you have, there you go, someone already found the draw function. If you want to choose stamps, then you can choose between a little heart or a star, and you can just place wherever you feel you are on this bar, which will give us an idea.
So mine is to the right of the green that says you are viewing Juliana Bocuti's screen.
Yeah.
There's a drop down arrow next to view options, and then you go to annotate, which is the 3rd option, and you see a new bar of options. You click on stamp, or if you hover over stamp, you'll be able to see the different stamp options. So just go and put 1 click where you think we are. And there's an eraser. If you put it by mistake, to the right of the stamp option, 2 steps, there's an eraser, and you can erase what you put and move it, go somewhere else. So if you want us to repeat the instructions, or maybe Juliana, you can put them in the chat so people are seeing them. I'm seeing a few people are adding their different strokes and stars and check marks and circles. Somebody's way down at the bottom. Ah, that's erased. Oh, that's a pretty heart. So that's interesting. So from where you sit, what I'm seeing is that we're all over the place. We're not clear. So please repeat. You go to, if you move your cursor, you see a green line that says you are viewing Juliana Bocuti's screen. To the right of that, it says view options. If you click on view options, you have a menu, and from that you pick the 3rd option down, annotate. That will bring up a different set of options, another menu. And from that, you click on stamp, and you can choose what you want in terms of shape. So you can have a heart, a star, an arrow, and you can mark that. Oh, that's so cute. Jim Rue put his name in a little arrow. People are getting creative. So I see that we are, yes, exactly. We are all over the place. And part of it is that we truly disagree, but part of it is that we are really not completely aware of other models, or we know of 1, or we know of 2, or we know of none. So Michael, this is not an evaluation. There's no measurement. This is just your sense. Are we so close to agreement? Are we really far apart? No consensus? Are we kind of on the way with a bunch of issues? So there isn't. This isn't a measurement. This is a measuring your personal sense, however that is for you, given your comfort of disagreement or confusion. So so because this was a worthy path, we embarked on this path to move along the line that where Jim Rue's arrow is pointing right there towards consensus, or towards some form of consensus that would enable us as a global community to say, these are the competencies for evaluation. And that if you're developing a scope of work, a TOR, and hiring someone, you kind of have the blessing of the community that you're doing the right thing. You have it right. Let's just be clear. People are already making those choices. So it's not as if we don't have this conversation, somehow the issue goes away. It's more that everybody who's developing a TOR just makes up their own decisions, whether it's USAID hiring people for monitoring an evaluation or for conducting an evaluation, MCC, UN Women, UNICEF, foundations. Everybody is making these choices somehow. A lot of people seem to be consulting each other's frameworks. So already that's good. This conversation has moved quite forward. In fact, the American Evaluation Association deeply consulted other models. CES just updated its competencies, and it also has done this in consultation. So there's already a lot of consultation around this. And having said that, we wanted to give ourselves, we raised some issues and concerns around, making sure we do this right. So if I can have the next slide. So maybe give me the next one first, and then we'll go back to this one. So these are three things that we talked about. We said, make sure you do not privilege some competency models over others, if it comes to that. So to be really respectful of elements that some evaluation groups believe are really important contextually for them, and to show that respect. So that was one. The second one was, do not use competency models to exclude. And maybe that point goes to the point that Marlene brought up, which is, don't use the competency model in a way to bar young and emerging evaluators, but find ways to use competency models to invite people in and help them along the path. So for sure, we wanted to do that. And then to understand the variation in competencies needed for different types of evaluation roles. So evaluation managers need, there's some common skills, some common competencies, but they need something tailored to their needs. Evaluation commissioners, evaluation implementers, internal evaluators. I teach evaluation management at the Evaluators Institute, and it's always interesting who comes to the table. There are some kind of core functions like the ones I mentioned here, but sometimes it's auditors or it's people who do monitoring, and they feel they need some evaluation competencies. So a next step might be for us to think about how to adapt whatever it is our consensus will come up with, how to adapt that for different kinds of roles. So it's true, Isha. So in fact, another kind of role is when you are a senior person in an organization, a senior manager. You don't do evaluation, but you are a user of evaluation. What do you need to know in your context to make evaluation a really effective tool? So once we get greater clarity here, we won't be duplicating all the time. We'll be focused on the adaptation piece for ourselves, and we'll be able to use these competencies in different ways. But I want to pause here and give space for people to add your advice and cautions as we go forward with this conversation. So maybe you can show the next slide, just so that those are up that we already have. Thank you. And then please take a moment in the chat to add any other considerations and cautions that you think we need to heed as we move forward in this conversation. So I'm seeing Fazila say, how do we take in consideration a recognition of prior learning and those with experience and no formal education qualification? So this issue is true no matter what the competency model is. And it also ties with the issue of do not exclude people. Do not use a competency model to exclude people. And so we must do that. I know that the CES kind of certification model does that. It does not require, a formal education. So absolutely, somebody who's been, because our profession is still evolving. Maybe everybody's profession is evolving, but ours just feels like it's at a slightly earlier stage. So thank you for that comment. We totally agree. And Florence is saying, so competencies for all the different types of users are all in these boxes. So these ones are for evaluators, the ones that we developed. Now the UNEG model has evaluation managers called out because that's a major need for them. So we do need to have that conversation thoughtfully as we think about consensus. So reading Jim's comment, many individuals come to the field of evaluation from their specific sectoral discipline, and absolutely. So we can recognize that in our conversation. So we don't want to elbow out someone who comes in with a strong health background and who wants to or has developed some good evaluation skills and has to do that work. So it's not about excluding that person. It's about helping us to say to that person to do evaluation. We believe you need these 5-6 things that you haven't necessarily learned as you have become an expert, in health. And Isha is saying even most M&E teachers lack understanding of up-to-date and are not up to date on their subjects, lack of evaluation case studies. Therefore, most students are confused with evaluation research. This is true. And I think that this was one of our motivations, if you remember, that without this clarity, we cannot be articulate about what evaluation is. Then someone who maybe does coaching and is a fantastic coach can say, well, I do evaluation. I help people think evaluatively, so I'm an evaluator. And we want to be clear if that is, we want to help somebody hiring somebody to be articulate about that. And I agree, it would be great to be clear of those differences and the nuances. I mean, we don't necessarily need boundaries that, again, kick people out, but just to be clear on those essential features. I see our saying it is important to mention that these competencies that are relevant to the assignment at hand in the TOR, so one is not disqualified at the interview stage and use the call for proposals to fulfill procurement requirements. So you raise another really good point there, Ponge, which is the fact that not every evaluation requires the same exact evaluation skills. So we need to reflect that. And I think the competency models do reflect that right now. And having a common framework is going to help us to go deeper and to be able to define that variation in a little bit clearer way. But certainly it's going to help commissioners of evaluation, evaluators. It's going to hopefully clarify that application process quite a bit. Okay. So if we could have the next slide, the next question is, how do we structure the conversation? what happened at the AEA is when we had those meetings is we agreed to move this conversation under the auspices of eval partners, because that is a good, that's our coalition. And it includes the commissioners and the evaluation implementers and the VOPEs and the NGO managers. And so we thought, and the government. And so we thought that that was a good place for it. We also agreed that as we move ahead, and Visva, you've raised your hand. Would you please put your comment in the chat? And then we can, yeah, it'll just be helpful to do that given our time frame. So how do we structure the conversation? So we said that what we wanted to do is use this year to have gatherings and conversations like we're having today, and to then target or aim for the Eval Partners Conference, possibly in October, at a later time in any case, at the end, towards the end of the year, maybe not in October, maybe later, and to come up with some kind of consensus document, consensus understanding that would throughout the year, that could be shared and discussed throughout the year with around the world with different VOPEs. And in November, thank you, Ada. So the Eval Partners Global Forum will be in November, so that's perfect. It gives us the year almost. And so in that space, we can kind of use that as a landmark for us to have a document that we agree with that explains our philosophy and our intended use of these competencies and some of the buckets. And if you remember that model with the circles, identifies that gray space on the areas of agreement and the adaptations. And in the meantime, hopefully we will have had a chance to discuss any issues that are outstanding as well. So I think that the important, so that's our idea for how to do that. So I wanted to just kind of pause and ask you all about how you think we should be structuring this conversation. And let me see what's being said here. So I'm looking at Lars. Here's a concern. One, I'm not certain fits here or maybe nowhere. I'm an anthropologist, so I easily think in terms of culture and cultural differences, which in turn may translate to differences in organization. Put differently, while working towards convergence, are we identifying and proposing models that are universal and by that token do not reckon with any cultural difference? Well, actually, context and cultural difference is one of the competency domains. So I think that philosophy is built into all the competency models that we have in different ways. So I think your comment very much has a place here, and it's one that we all resonate with. So thank you for that comment. I mean, it's a higher bar then, to think about what is culture and what part of what we call culture is unconscious bias that we want to question in the spirit of no one left behind. So this is exactly why evaluation has a high bar for itself for how it will intervene, to make a useful contribution. So thank you. I appreciate your comment very much. Marlene, I'm seeing your comment. I personally think that competency TOR should involve more passion, intellect, and technical know-how of M&E. So now you talk about, you're talking here about, well, this is broader, first of all, than competencies. Or maybe you could talk about requiring passion, but I think that a lot of TORs require knowledge of a technical area or demonstration of certain values. In some TORs, it will say we want an organization that demonstrates a gender equality frame in its work, or a commitment to sustainability, environmental sustainability. So I think that many TORs, actually many commissioners of evaluation, agree with you, and not all, but many do. So that's a really good point to think about the kind of mindset of the organization or the consultant being hired. And also many organizations now have really strong M&E systems that embed in them and make explicit the values that they wish to see, you know, in evaluations that are consistent with their own organizations. So Florence is saying, as shown in our very first poll question, most of those in this webinar are evaluators. How do we bring other critical users to this conversation, or indeed other subjects? You know, that is a really good question. And I think that this is why we thought that Eval Partners would be a good place, because it also has parliamentarians. It also has a lot of commissioners, the UN, the international banks, bilaterals. It connects with OECD DAC. So it has that broad base of stakeholders, and many of them were at the discussion at the AEA in November. And I think that, again, everybody wants to have some level of consensus that enables us to have that level of credibility. Oh, I see the question from Visba. How do you recommend a role model evaluation exercise to learn? I mean, I'm not the expert on that question. I think we have quite a few other experts right on this call. And so that might be a great subject for another conversation. But certainly it would be something that would be supported or would be needed after we have a consensus on competencies. So Fabiola is saying, I think the main question we need to do what we need to do is, what do we need to be competent at in order to be a good evaluator? Absolutely, that is the question. And somebody else had asked, how does the parliament create evaluation culture in any country? Well, I think Sri Lanka could probably do a webinar on that. But there are other countries. I remember when Morocco, early on in the Eval Partners, after the Eval Partners' birth, embedded evaluation in their parliament. So I think also looking at the United States, looking at the GAO, looking at South Africa and some of the amazing things SAMIA has done to broker and push evaluation. I think there are a lot of examples like related to this. And UNICEF has several publications that it developed in the early days of Eval Partners with excellent case studies related to this. So thank you for the question. So Isha is saying, I firmly believe that M&E cannot define as academia. It is a practitioner's world to learn. Well, you know what? Actually, we're seeing those demographics as well in the AEA. We're seeing many more practitioners. And so in a way, competencies become even more important because they're now evaluations more embedded. There's more need for it. Certainly in the United States with the 2018 Evidence Act, all these agencies are developing and establishing their own evaluation offices. There's an increased demand for evaluation. So practice is a core piece to this, and practitioners must be at the table. So yes, and also that's another really good point you make, Isha, about the intersectionality. You know, we need that whole systems collaboration with different kinds of expertise, and a strong evaluator can help to bring that together. In fact, I was doing I went to one of the several actually of the public hearings and spoke as American Evaluation Association president when the legislation was being developed and after it was launched, when they were thinking about how to implement it here in the United States. And one of the questions that I was so lucky to be on the panel when it was asked, was one of the leaders of the legislation said, so I'm confused, how do we find these people? We're expecting people who are who understand ethics and philosophy and practical information around a project, and who have methodologies and quantitative skills, and maybe who even know big data. where are these people? And I said to her, you know, look no further than our competency models and how we define the use of those models, because the use is not to find necessarily one person. You need a team. And once you understand the competencies you need, now you can look for a team that can fulfill those. So great point, Isha, great point. And Rukaya is saying, will a central framework then be the basis for certification? So okay, so you're ahead. I don't know. We haven't talked about certification yet. Or if we have, this isn't where we are. So you see, we're in a nascent space. We're saying, can we have consensus? How are we going to use that? Are we going to use, I mean, for sure, we're going to use them in TORs. We know that. But are we going to develop a certification? I'm not sure. Maybe. Maybe, but we need that. And there are this right now. Certifications exist in Canada. So CES has a certification. The Evaluators Institute has a certificate that it gives, so it has a certification. Universities who give out master's degrees, that is a certification of sorts in evaluation. Some have concentrations, not necessarily a focus of a whole master's. So there's a range of certifications that are available, but we don't have consensus. Actually, IPDET has its version of certification. So that's exactly why we're having this conversation. And then I see the next comment, benchmark from developed and developing countries. Devise a framework with generic competencies that can put forward for consensus. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, it fits with our buckets. And are they saying Kyrgyzstan Parliament is a very good example as well? Yes, thank you. It's great to see the work that they're doing to promote evaluation. So I'm looking at, so now it is also possible that competency models that evaluation commissioners and donors believe are appropriate may differ from what evaluators in certain culture, thanks Lars for bringing this up, think it's appropriate, especially as they know the context better. So it would be a matter of difference in ideology, and it would be interesting to figure out how to make sure that commissioners and local evaluators are able to listen to each other and understand different perspectives in terms of what competencies are valued for the context, culture, and evaluation. So having a common competency model does not solve all problems. It's not the answer to every issue in the world. How we use it, I mean, the hard work is still in countries. I know a little bit about the path that CEMEA has followed and how hard CEMEA has worked in South Africa to become recognized, to be at the table, to work with a government that's also interested in evaluation and committed to evaluation. But then who controls what and who's in charge is something that we all have to work on in our countries. And this is why our Eval Partners collaboration is strengthening to us, and having some of these common frameworks add to the credibility that VOPEs bring to that conversation. So I completely resonate with that point. Thank you, Sonal and Lars. And then Dulmina is saying, we do we not have levels of competencies for different levels of staff, such as junior professionals, evaluation managers, head of evaluation? Now, I'm not the expert on all the competency models. I certainly know that UNEG has that, and I love that in what they have, but not all competency models have that. So that's the next, that's certainly a required component to help people see a path for development, and also to help them see what different roles need. So thank you, Dulmina. Okay, Isha is saying, not easy to get parliamentarian, but I think it is a challenge. How do you convert the political agenda to a national agenda? Yeah, and now you're broadening the conversation. Again, great important things. And when you get really smart people together, there's a lot the boundaries of the brainstorming goes beyond this narrow piece that we're talking about. But certainly it is not easy to get parliamentarians on board. Will the chat be made available? Yes. So we are taking notes, and what I'm going to do is to organize a summary with the points, kind of affinity, the pieces of feedback that we have, and include some of these points that are not necessarily about competencies, and share it with Acela and Dulmina, and they will share it with everyone who has registered. So Marlena, I'm so glad you bring up ethics. This is something that's a pet thing for me. And I'm currently writing a chapter with Donna Mertens in a new ethics book coming out, because this feels to be a core issue, for me. And yes, ethics, methodologies, technical know-how, capacity development, absolutely. Once we have these, well, maybe we don't have to wait. Maybe we can structure the conversation like that. I really like your suggestion. Thank you. And Marcia is saying that in the UN system, there's an existing, an interesting case could be taken as an example with regards to the certification and procurement. Okay. Yeah, I think that there's no paucity of models for certification. Probably the International Coaching Federation is another great example for how certification emerged. In our community, we have had some pushback around certification. Some of us believe it's really a very good thing, and some of us do not agree and think that we shouldn't do it. So we need to put on the table, we need to have a conversation on the use of these competencies, and whether a certification might be something that we lead to. And then of course that raises a question, who is going to manage that certification? What's the role of eval partners? What's the role of OPEs? What's the role of academia? So it's a big issue, and we will need to get to the table and bring some attention to that. So Sonal is saying, we've just completed a series of papers on local wisdom where we discussed the disconnect, hoping to share it soon. So let me say here, I have developed a curated space with the documents related to certification, and I am going to put it in this space right now, and then you can see all see what some of those documents are, and then please continue to share. So here is the curated space. I mean, it's not rocket science what's in there. I just collected the different competencies and comments, and some of the people who are engaged in the conversation. We wanted to have a space for that. So it's not, it's public to anyone who has the link, but it's not a website, because it's kind of a working, if you will, group. So Sonal, when you have the papers ready, I'd love to upload them there too. So Lars, it's not that we select one model. It's not that we select it, but it's that when we work for, let's say, for example, we work with communities in a space where where consensus is important, where at the same time there's a lot of poverty, and where people don't speak the dominant language. Our evaluation training tells us that we need to think about how we enter that space. We need to think about how to partner with that community, and not to trample in, but to be aware of our privilege, to be aware of our being external, that it's not enough to just say, well, let's sit down around a conference room table. So, I mean, obviously I'm exaggerating, and that mixed methods will help us as a frame, as a design, but there's a lot that we need to do to be able to be culturally responsive, and also again to manage our place of privilege in order to have a real conversation. And also that we need to think about whether the questions we are asking are in the right frame, or are the questions that people in the community want to ask, and to do some listening before we even design the questions that we're going to ask. So I think that there has been a lot of work in the area of culture responsive evaluation, certainly at the AEA, but NZIA's model has a lot, it is very much founded in that value. So this is an area that many of us care a lot about. So Michael's saying, are we going to access a recording? And how can one access some resources from your end related to evaluation competencies? The resources, I put the drop mark link below. So you can go there, and then once you have it, you can go there anytime you would like to see what's up. Right now, not a lot is up. So it's also up to you all when you have relevant papers, relevant thoughts, summaries, proceedings to post them there. And yes, we will have a recording. So lots of agreement around the ethics and the models. If we want to have an evaluation as a profession, competencies must be defined. Yeah, absolutely. Education and training need to be designed accordingly, like any other profession. Absolutely. It's just, if we don't, we disappear, essentially. Who are we? Lots of agreement. Oh, that's a good question, to share the social the curated space on social media. You know, maybe I should take down one file from there which has people's names and addresses, and the reason is because I haven't asked their permission. So I will do that, and then yeah, it's okay to share. And Marlene is saying, is there a possibility that such a conversation could initiate policy development, especially matters related to creating a guide to competencies that are inclusive of both existing and emerging evaluators? I personally feel that such guides could also advise global actors to promote capacity development on such competencies. That is our goal. That is our goal, to have a document that is not only just a list of competencies, but has all these other pieces of caution, intention, intentionality, roles, use, and it doesn't have to be a definitive and done. You know, let's put down where we agree, like Gail Barrington's model says, and then let's plan for the next step. So the next step might be levels of quality, types of roles. Then the next step might be something else. So absolutely. And Isha is saying, Tessie recommendations, some area needed to be of concern. It is a big problem. As example, mostly unrealistic. Some are cannot related to findings. Oh, I see. I see what you're saying. So competencies are not necessarily standards for what good quality evaluation is. So maybe we also need standards for what good evaluation is. So we just need to, maybe we need to do work in that space too. So, and they're interrelated for sure. So I agree with you. I think the space of recommendations is a thorny one. So if we can see the next slide, I just want to reiterate here that it's our intention to discuss in different evaluation conferences. So consider yourselves, every one of you here, as leaders of this conversation, and put together think tanks and sessions where you discuss them, and send over the comments, and we can upload them in the Dropbox. So we can have and read what's there. You will have the notes from this conversation here, so that we're not it's okay to have duplication. It's how we internalize things, but let's try to see, let's try to really identify what the any issues that we need to resolve and ideas. And if you have an inspiration for organizing the next discussion differently, for example, having having small groups, one on evaluation commissioners, one on evaluation, internal evaluators, one on VOPEs, fine. Just innovate in how you want to organize it. There's no one leader in this conversation. We're all working together. And for sure, one of the commitments that we have is engaging VOPEs. We believe in the credibility and role of VOPEs, and the more we can do there, that, so to me, supporting VOPEs is about supporting a multi-stakeholder community in evaluation, because that's what VOPEs are. So just seeing some of the final comments here. Another aspect of culture and cultural differences concerns language. Absolutely. Actually, there's a New Directions journal coming out in evaluation, coming out in the spring, I believe, which has a chapter. It's all on culture competence, and there's a chapter on language equity and language rights. I'm not getting the second word. It's not rights, it's something else, but it's all about language. Absolutely. So language is definitely a way you can privilege and exclude. So thank you. Yeah, I think that we're all like-minded here. I can see Sonal. Yes, Lars, you know, absolutely. What is VOPEs? Voluntary Organizations for Professional Evaluation. So these are evaluation societies, networks, associations that are usually country-based, sometimes regional, and they invite evaluators, evaluation commissioners, people who care about evaluation and promoting evaluation to come together and be a professional exchange, a group that does professional exchange, and also a group that advocates for the use of evaluation in policies and programs. And the term, the godfather is Jim Rue, who put the definition right there, who struggled a lot to find a good term. The word voluntary is there because it means that if you have a consulting firm or a private university and you pretend that you are the representative of the evaluation community in your country, that's not okay. We are looking for people who are volunteers, who are not, I mean, it's fine to benefit from being a part of it, but it's not about funneling work to your organization. That's why voluntary was important to us. And you can go to the IOCE website, ioce.net. So Jim, maybe you can write that in the chat, where there's an interactive map of all the recognized VOPEs in the world today. And there's a process for that. So wonderful. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And I'm seeing some of the last comments here. Your advice to young evaluators. Well, actually, I hope you're part of YE. I'm talking to Visva, the Young and Emerging Evaluators Network, which is amazing. It touches about 20,000 people around the world, but the active ones are, closer to 300. There are lots of great opportunities. So here's my email, and after this, you can contact me, and I can put you in touch with the Young and Emerging Evaluators. That's a good place to go. And oh yes, also, so Nala, maybe you can put your information in, because the community of evaluators in South Asia is also a great place for young and emerging evaluators to contact as well. And when is your conference, Sonal? Maybe you can let us know. Great. So you can see Sonal's email right there, and she's one of our wonderful leaders. This has been a great exchange. I know I've just been talking, but it's hard in 1 hour to get it all in. I'm excited to thank you. September 2020 is the Community of Evaluators conference. So we are going to share the information with everybody. And Soma, thank you for having me in this collaboration with Sleva. It's a real privilege. Thank you so much.
Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute myself. Tessie, thank you very much. It's been a great webinar. You walked us through the journey of evaluation competencies from where it started up to where it is, and you raised the current issues, the challenges, and you have also organized this in such a way that all participants, as far as I could see from their comments, were fully engaged, raised very meaningful and thought-provoking messages. So as usual, it was wonderful to hear from you. And I'm sure all of us take away with us some ideas, some impressions, and maybe some commitments to work towards work towards coming to a common consensus on what competencies should be, how they should be adapted, etc. So let me say thank you very much for a wonderful webinar and for wonderful communication, as you always do. Thank you very much to all the participants. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Soma. Yes, if you want, okay, if you want your email included, some people don't, just send it to, send it maybe to Acela or to, well, I don't know who's been the contact person on the Sleva side. And then we'll just put you on the list. So it's great to be part of this amazing community. Thank you all. Oh, good. You're putting them right in chat. Perfect. Then I will add them to the list.